Your body is not breaking down, it is responding, precisely and intelligently, to the signals you send it every single day. Long before motivation, discipline, or genetics take credit, your brain is quietly deciding whether to repair or to defend, to grow or to conserve, to thrive or to merely survive. What you repeat becomes biology. What you ignore becomes cost. And the most powerful truth is this: without dramatic effort or extreme change, your daily habits are already rewriting your nervous system, reshaping your energy, and determining the future strength of your mind and body. Whether you are aware of it or not, the first signal you send each day is how you treat your nervous system when you wake up, and this signal is far more powerful than most people realize. Before you speak, before you check your phone, before you decide what kind of day this will be, your brain is already scanning the environment for meaning. It is asking whether the world is predictable or chaotic, whether it should open itself to learning or lock itself into defense. The way you begin your morning quietly answers these questions at a biological level. When you wake abruptly, surrounded by artificial light, loud alarms, and immediate information overload, the brain interprets this as urgency. Stress hormones rise, heart rate increases, and attention narrows. This response evolved to protect us from danger, but when triggered daily without real threat, it slowly reshapes the nervous system into a state of constant vigilance. Over time, this reduces emotional resilience, disrupts digestion, and drains energy even before the day truly begins. The body isn't failing you in these moments. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do when it believes survival is at stake. A calmer morning sends a very different message. Exposure to natural light helps synchronize the brain's internal clock, aligning hormones that control alertness, metabolism, and mood. Gentle movement signals to the brain that the body is functional and capable, increasing blood flow without triggering stress. Slow, steady breathing activates neural pathways associated with safety and regulation, lowering cortisol and allowing clearer thinking. None of this requires intensity or discipline. It requires awareness. These simple actions tell your nervous system that it does not need to rush or brace itself, that it can allocate energy toward creativity, learning, and repair. This matters because the brain is not an isolated organ. It is the command center that decides where resources go. When the brain perceives safety, it invests in long-term health. Immune function improves. Inflammation decreases. Muscles recover more efficiently. Even decision-making becomes less impulsive because the brain is not operating from scarcity or threat. Over time, this repeated sense of safety rewires neural circuits related to emotional control and focus. You begin to respond rather than react, not because you force discipline, but because your biology is no longer stuck in alarm mode. Morning habits also shape identity at a subtle level. When you begin the day with intention rather than urgency, you reinforce the idea that you are someone who can guide their own internal state. This belief itself has physiological consequences. Confidence is not just psychological, it alters posture, breathing patterns, and hormone release. Each calm morning becomes evidence to the brain that the body is capable of self-regulation, which strengthens neural pathways associated with resilience. Importantly, this habit is not about perfection or rigid routines. It is about reducing unnecessary friction between your brain and environment. Even small adjustments accumulate. Standing near a window. Stretching for a few minutes. Allowing silence before stimulation. These moments are not wasted time, they are instructions. They tell the brain how to operate for the rest of the day. And because the brain learns through repetition, these instructions become default settings rather than conscious effort. Over weeks and months, this daily signal compounds. Stress becomes easier to manage. Focus becomes more stable. Energy fluctuations soften. The body spends less time recovering from perceived threats and more time adapting positively. You may not notice dramatic changes at first, but internally, systems are recalibrating, learning that life does not have to begin in chaos, that strength can emerge from calm. That health is often built not by pushing harder but by teaching the nervous system that it is allowed to settle, to observe, to prepare without fear, to move forward with clarity rather than tension, and to meet the day as something that can be engaged with thoughtfully rather than something that must be survived. The way you move your body each day shapes your brain just as much as it shapes your muscles, and this influence runs far deeper than appearance or physical strength. Human movement evolved as a survival language between the body and the brain. Every step, stretch, or shift in posture sends information upward, informing the nervous system about capability, safety, and adaptability. When movement becomes regular, the brain receives a consistent message that this body is alive, responsive, and prepared to meet its environment rather than withdraw from it. Modern life quietly removes this dialogue. Long periods of stillness teach the brain a different lesson, one rooted in conservation and caution. Blood flow slows, joints stiffen, and neural circuits responsible for coordination and balance receive less stimulation. The brain adapts by lowering metabolic investment in these systems, not as punishment, but as efficiency. What is not used is gradually deprioritized. Over time, this can manifest as mental fog, emotional flatness, or a general sense of physical heaviness that feels difficult to explain but deeply familiar. Consistent movement reverses this process by reawakening communication between tissues and the brain. When muscles contract rhythmically, they release signaling molecules that travel through the bloodstream and influence mood, immune function, and brain plasticity. These molecules support the growth of new neural connections, particularly in regions associated with memory and emotional balance. Movement becomes a form of nourishment, not just for the body, but for the mind that depends on it. Intensity is not the deciding factor here. The brain is less concerned with how hard you move and more concerned with whether movement is reliable. Walking, stretching, lifting, or flowing through simple patterns all stimulate coordination and spatial awareness. These actions engage multiple brain regions at once, strengthening networks that support focus and adaptability. Each session becomes a rehearsal for resilience, teaching the brain that effort can be entered and exited safely, without overwhelming the system. Movement also refines emotional regulation. Physical activity provides a controlled environment for experiencing increased heart rate, muscle tension, and breath changes without real danger. The brain learns that these sensations are not threats. Over time, this reduces anxiety and improves tolerance for stress in everyday life. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable because the nervous system has practiced recovery through motion. There is also a quiet psychological shift that occurs when movement becomes part of daily life. The body begins to feel like a partner rather than an obstacle. This sense of cooperation changes how you inhabit yourself. Posture improves, breathing deepens, and confidence emerges not as bravado but as stability. The brain registers this alignment and adjusts its expectations, reinforcing behaviors that support health rather than sabotage it. Movement further supports metabolic health in subtle ways. It improves insulin sensitivity, enhances circulation, and helps regulate appetite signals. These effects stabilize energy levels, reducing the mental highs and crashes that often drive impulsive choices. When the body moves regularly, the brain gains a steadier platform from which to think, plan, and create. Over time, consistent movement reshapes identity. You are no longer someone trying to force exercise into a busy life, but someone who understands motion as a basic human need. This shift reduces resistance and guilt, replacing them with curiosity and respect for the body's intelligence. The brain responds by integrating movement into its sense of normalcy rather than treating it as a disruption. The most profound changes often arrive quietly. Muscles feel more responsive. Thoughts feel less stagnant. Stress resolves more quickly. The body becomes a place of flow rather than friction. All of this emerges not from extreme effort but from repetition and presence. Each time you move, you remind your brain that growth is possible, that strength can be built gradually, that adaptation is not a crisis but a natural process, and that this living system you inhabit is designed to respond to motion with clarity, balance, and an increasing sense of ease. The way you eat each day speaks directly to your brain, long before food becomes energy or tissue. Eating is a biological conversation, not a mechanical act, and the brain listens closely to patterns rather than individual choices. When meals arrive at irregular times or are driven by stress and distraction, the brain interprets this as uncertainty. In response, it increases cravings, heightens reward sensitivity, and pushes the body towards storage rather than balance. This is not a failure of willpower, but a protective strategy shaped by evolution. Consistent, balanced eating sends a stabilizing signal through the nervous system. When blood sugar rises and falls gently, the brain experiences predictability. This steadiness supports attention, emotional regulation, and decision-making. The brain no longer needs to chase quick energy, so impulsive behavior softens. You begin to feel more patient, more grounded, not because you forced restraint, but because your biology is no longer reacting to perceived scarcity. Food quality matters because nutrients are instructions. Proteins provide the building blocks for neurotransmitters that influence mood and motivation. Healthy fats support cell membranes and hormone signaling, including those involved in learning and memory. Fiber feeds gut bacteria that produce compounds affecting inflammation and brain chemistry. When these elements are present regularly, the body functions with less friction, and the brain receives clearer feedback from the systems it oversees. The gut plays a central role in this process. It contains a vast network of neurons that communicate directly with the brain. When digestion is strained by erratic eating or highly processed foods, this communication becomes distorted. Signals of discomfort, inflammation, or imbalance travel upward, subtly influencing mood and cognition. Over time, this can manifest as anxiety, irritability, or mental fatigue without an obvious cause. When eating becomes rhythmic and supportive, the gut sends calmer signals, allowing the brain to operate with greater clarity and emotional stability. Timing also shapes this relationship. Allowing periods between meals gives the body time to process nutrients efficiently and reset metabolic pathways. This rhythm improves insulin sensitivity and encourages the body to use energy effectively rather than storing it unnecessarily. The brain benefits from this efficiency because it relies on stable energy delivery. Sudden spikes and crashes disrupt focus and amplify stress responses, while steadiness fosters sustained mental performance. There is also an important psychological dimension to eating. When meals are approached with awareness rather than urgency, the brain associates nourishment with safety and care. This association reduces compulsive eating patterns driven by stress or emotional discomfort. Over time, the relationship with food becomes less reactive and more respectful. The body learns that nourishment is reliable, not something to hoard or fear. This shift alters appetite signals in subtle but meaningful ways. Hunger becomes clearer. Fullness becomes easier to recognize. The brain recalibrates its expectations, reducing noise around food decisions. What once felt like constant negotiation becomes intuitive guidance. This is not control imposed from the mind, but cooperation emerging from biological alignment over weeks and months. These patterns compound. Inflammation decreases. Energy levels stabilize. Mood becomes more even. The brain begins to trust the body, and the body responds by functioning more efficiently. Eating transforms from a source of confusion or conflict into a quiet anchor within the day. Each balanced meal becomes a reassurance, a reminder that the system is supported, that fuel is arriving as needed, that survival does not require urgency, and that health often emerges not from strict rules but from consistency, awareness, and a willingness to listen to what the body has been communicating all along. The way you relate to mental strain determines whether your brain sharpens or slowly exhausts itself. Modern life trains attention to remain constantly outward, moving from task to task without pause, treating rest as something to earn rather than something required. The brain adapts to this pattern by staying in a state of continuous output, allocating resources toward vigilance and problem-solving while quietly postponing repair. At first this feels productive, even empowering, but beneath the surface, neural efficiency begins to decline as recovery is delayed again and again. Periods of stillness interrupt this cycle in a way nothing else can. When the mind is allowed to settle without stimulation, the brain shifts into a different mode of operation. Neural activity becomes more synchronized, allowing information to be organized rather than endlessly accumulated. Emotional signals that were previously drowned out by noise become clearer, not louder, and the body receives permission to lower stress hormones that have been circulating unnecessarily. This is not idleness, it is recalibration. From a biological perspective, mental strain is expensive. Every unresolved demand keeps certain neural circuits active, consuming energy and reinforcing tension. When the brain never fully disengages, it begins to blur urgency with importance. Everything feels pressing, even when it is not. Stillness creates contrast. It teaches the brain that not every signal requires a response, that attention can rest without consequence. Over time, this reduces cognitive overload and improves the ability to prioritize with precision rather than anxiety. Stillness also reshapes emotional regulation. When the mind is constantly occupied, emotions often surface indirectly through irritability, fatigue, or distraction. Quiet moments allow emotional signals to be processed instead of suppressed. This processing reduces internal friction and lowers inflammatory responses throughout the body. The nervous system learns that it does not need to store unresolved tension for later expression. What is felt can be acknowledged and released rather than carried forward. The brain's capacity for insight depends on these moments. Creativity, problem-solving, and perspective often emerge when effort temporarily stops. This is because the brain uses rest periods to reorganize information, connecting ideas that were previously fragmented. Without stillness, thought becomes linear and rigid. With it, thinking becomes flexible and adaptive. Solutions arise not through force, but through space. There is also a physical dimension to mental rest. When the brain enters a calmer state, muscles release unnecessary tension, breathing deepens, and circulation improves. These changes reinforce the sense of safety that allows deeper recovery. The body mirrors the brain, and the brain responds to the body, creating a feedback loop of regulation rather than stress. Importantly, stillness does not require isolation or long periods of silence. It can exist within brief pauses, slow breathing, quiet observation, or moments of intentional disengagement. What matters is the absence of demand. These moments teach the brain that it is allowed to exist without producing, solving, or reacting. Over time, this permission changes baseline functioning. Focus becomes steadier. Reactions soften. Fatigue resolves more quickly. The psychological impact is equally significant. A person who regularly practices stillness develops a different relationship with thought. Thoughts are no longer treated as commands, but as events that pass through awareness. This shift reduces rumination and self-criticism. The brain becomes less entangled in its own activity, conserving energy and improving clarity. Emotional resilience grows not through toughness, but through familiarity with calm. As this habit deepens, the nervous system becomes more efficient at transitioning between effort and rest. Stressful situations no longer linger as long within the body. Recovery accelerates. The mind feels cleaner, less cluttered. Stillness becomes a form of internal hygiene, clearing mental residue before it accumulates into exhaustion. Over time, this practice quietly upgrades cognitive performance, emotional balance, and physical recovery, allowing the brain to function not as a machine under constant demand, but as a living system that thrives when it is allowed to pause, integrate, and return to the world with renewed coherence and quiet strength. The way you protect sleep determines how deeply your body and brain are allowed to renew themselves. Sleep is not simply a pause in consciousness, but an active biological process during which repair, regulation, and integration occur with remarkable precision. When sleep is shortened or fragmented, the brain does not simply feel tired, it operates under incomplete maintenance, carrying unresolved signals into the following day. Over time, this accumulation quietly alters mood, metabolism, and resilience in ways that are often misunderstood as personal weakness rather than physiological strain. During deep sleep, the brain enters a state of internal housekeeping. Metabolic byproducts generated during waking hours are cleared, neural connections are refined, and learning is reinforced. Emotional experiences are processed and integrated, reducing reactivity and sharpening perspective. Hormones that govern appetite, muscle repair, immune defense, and stress regulation are released in carefully timed patterns. This orchestration cannot be rushed or replaced. When sleep is cut short, these processes are interrupted, leaving the system partially updated and increasingly inefficient. The body responds quickly to sleep disruption. Stress hormones rise, insulin sensitivity declines, and appetite-regulating signals become distorted. Hunger increases not because energy is truly needed, but because the brain is searching for compensation. Cravings intensify, patience shortens, and decision-making becomes more reactive. None of this reflects a lack of discipline. It reflects a nervous system operating without full restoration, attempting to meet demands with limited resources. Sleep also shapes the emotional landscape. Without sufficient rest, the brain's ability to regulate emotion weakens. Neutral events feel heavier, challenges feel larger, and recovery from stress takes longer. With adequate sleep, emotional responses soften, perspective widens, and resilience strengthens. The same experiences are interpreted differently because the brain has the capacity to contextualize rather than defend. The timing of sleep matters as much as duration. Regular sleep and wake times anchor the brain's internal clock, aligning physiological rhythms that influence energy, digestion, and focus. When this rhythm is consistent, the body anticipates rest and prepares for it, making sleep deeper and more efficient. Irregular schedules confuse these signals, forcing the brain to work harder to initiate and maintain rest. Over time, this misalignment contributes to chronic fatigue even when time in bed appears sufficient. Protecting sleep also means protecting the transition into it. The brain does not shut off instantly. It gradually shifts from alertness to restoration. When evenings are filled with stimulation, bright light, or unresolved mental activity, this transition is delayed. The body remains partially in alert mode, reducing the depth of sleep even if hours are spent in bed. Creating a gentle descent into rest teaches the nervous system that it is safe to disengage, allowing deeper recovery to occur. Sleep influences physical performance in subtle but powerful ways. Muscle coordination, reaction time, and strength expression all depend on neural efficiency. When sleep is adequate, movement feels smoother and more controlled. Recovery from physical effort accelerates. Injury risk decreases. The body operates with precision rather than compensation, reflecting a nervous system that has completed its nightly recalibration. There is also a psychological trust built through consistent sleep. When the body learns that rest will be honored, it releases the need to cling to energy during the day. This trust reduces stress and conserves mental bandwidth. The brain no longer operates as if resources are scarce. Creativity improves. Focus deepens. Effort becomes more sustainable over weeks and months. Sleep shapes identity at a biological level. You begin to feel more stable, not because life becomes easier, but because your system is better equipped to meet it. Challenges are processed rather than absorbed. Energy is restored rather than borrowed. The body becomes a place of reliability rather than resistance. Sleep, when respected, does not merely support health, it actively constructs it, night after night, quietly rebuilding systems that allow you to think clearly, move efficiently, and respond to the world with balance instead of strain.